Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly class, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. We're coming to the end of chapter 5. The sheet that you have in front of you has the paragraphs inverted. It's not a mistake. There are different versions of the order of the last few paragraphs of this chapter. So I'm going to follow the version that we have in our Siddur. That's that we do the middle paragraph. Ben Bagbag said. We're going to do that Mishnah, followed by the next one, and then we go back to the top of the page. That's the order we have it in our Mishnah. And there are different versions, and there's not one correct version and one incorrect one. They're just different opinions as to what the order should be. Ben Bagbag said, turn it over and turn it over. Turn what over? We'll soon see. For all is therein. Everything is in it. And look into it and become gray and old therein. And do not move away from it, for you have no better portion than it. So before we go into what the it is, there's something, a little bit of a mystery about a man by the name of Bagbag. It's not a very common name. In fact, it doesn't exist. There is no one that we know of whose name is Bag. Certainly not Bagbag. If you look in the next Mishnah, the next paragraph, it's Ben Hey. There's nobody by the name Hey. At least it's very unusual to have names like that. So the commentators point out that these two rabbis, they may have been two, they may have been the same person, were using a coded name. They wouldn't want to give their real name. Why was there a problem with their real name? Because they were converts to Judaism. And it was dangerous to convert to Judaism at that time where they lived. And in many periods of Jewish history, if a non-Jew converted to Judaism, that was punishable by death. That was apostasy. There's a famous story about 250, 300 years ago in the city of Vilna. There was the son of the Count Potocki, was a very prestigious nobleman in Poland, got interested in Judaism. He moved away to Holland, where he converted to Judaism, and he came back dressed differently with a beard, and he would sit in the house of study, in the shul, in the synagogue, and would study Torah all the time. And then, I'm not going to go through the whole story, it was discovered that he was the son of the Count, and he was sentenced to death, to be burnt alive. And the only way he could save himself is he recants his conversion, and he agrees to go back to his original religion, which he refused, and he was burnt alive in the city of Vilna. And his grave is still considered a very holy place. He was considered to be a very holy man. So that was just one example about how Jews were not allowed to accept converts, and converts were not allowed to convert at the peril of losing their lives. And so this Bagbag was actually a convert, according to this interpretation. And why was he called Bagbag? It was a code, or Hey. Bag is a acronym for two words, Ben Gerim. He was the son of converts. So according to this, he may not have been a convert himself, but he might have been a child of a convert. So Bag is actually not a word, it's an acronym, Ben Gerim. Some say that Bag, in Hebrew, letters are numbers. Bag is 2 and 3. It adds up to 5. And Hey is 5. And the reason why he was called the son of 5, because every convert is considered to be a descendant of Abraham and Sarah. They were the first people to convert to Judaism. They were the first ones to rebel against the paganism of their time and adopt the belief in one God. And Abraham and Sarah are considered to be the first Jews, but they were considered to be converts to Judaism. So every convert is referred to as the child, the son, or the daughter of Abraham and Sarah, whose names acquired the letter Hey. The letter Hey in Abraham was originally called Abram, and a Hey was added when he circumcised himself, which meant his conversion was complete. The Hey was added to his name. It's no longer Abram, it's Abraham. And the same thing with Sarah. Her original name was Sarai, and it was changed to Sarah, which has the letter Hey at the end of it. So Ben Bagbag, Bag, which adds up to Hey, which is 5, is a coded name for a convert. That's what they use as a code to know that this person was a convert, or a son of converts, a daughter of converts. Why are we so interested in identifying them as converts? Well, the simple reason is we couldn't give their original name, because in those days it was dangerous. So the name that they used, so that name remained, even though it's no longer a danger to refer to them by their real name. But there's also a deeper understanding why it's important to identify them as sons of converts or as converts. But by the way, when we call up a convert to the Torah, you have to give the name and the person and the father's name. So let's say the name of the person is Shmuel. The convert takes that name, although sometimes converts take the name Abraham. Their father is Abraham, so they would call him up to the Torah Avraham or Shmuel or Shlomo, whatever, Ben Avraham. And the same thing would be true whenever you need to identify the father's name for a man or a woman. For example, on a tombstone, the name of the father would be Abraham. When you make a mishaberach, a special prayer for someone who is ill, for a man or a woman, you mention the mother's name for that prayer. You would say the name of the person. Let's say the name was Avraham ben Sarah. Even though the mother had a different name, you'd go by the mother of the Jewish people, who was Sarah. Yes? Okay, so now let's try to understand what Ben Bagbag is saying. Turn it over and turn it over. Turn what over? He's referring to the study of Torah. And he's coming to it from an outsider who appreciates the beauty of Torah. And in fact, Judaism ascribes its very existence to a convert. Not only Abraham, the first convert, and Sarah, but where do we find the giving of the Torah mentioned in the Torah? In the section of the Torah that's referred to as Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, who converted to Judaism. And the Zohar says God did not give the Torah to the Jewish people until Yisro joined them. God wanted the outsider to join in a way that he would not give the Torah, because the Torah would be lacking. Whenever the Torah is only accepted by those who are insiders, it means that the Torah is missing something. Here the Torah wanted someone to come who's from an outsider and adopt it and embrace it. Now, this doesn't mean that we're looking for converts. Judaism tries as hard as possible to dissuade a potential convert, but we do embrace the convert, not just reluctantly. Okay, we have no choice, we have to accept him, but the convert really validates Judaism in a way that those who are born Jewish cannot do. So this is the contribution of Ben Bagbag, this convert or son of converts, that he's saying turn it over and turn it over, that you shouldn't think that Torah is just some area of interest. It's something that you have to continually turn over, keep on studying it, keep on learning it, keep on relating to it. And even if you already studied something, don't get tired to study it again, repeat it over and over again. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect, as commentators point out, that Ben Bhagavad is saying, I went to university. I was trained secularly. I know a lot of different areas of knowledge that you Jews who are born Jewish may not have been exposed to. I can tell you there's nothing greater than Torah. Torah beats all the other cultures and all the other disciplines by far. And when it comes to any other discipline, it has its limits. If you already know it, then there's no need to keep on studying it. If you know your profession, you're an engineer, and you know everything you have to know about engineering, and there's no new developments, that's it. You don't have to repeat learning it over again. There's no mitzvah to review your study of engineering or your study of law, whatever the subject may be. But when it comes to Torah, no matter how many times you studied it and mastered it and remember it, I told this many times about this rabbi in Montreal that I met a few times, Rabbi Hirschsprung, who knew the whole Talmud by heart, word for word, with its major commentaries, word for word. He told me that when he was at 18, he already mastered the whole Talmud word for word. Now, the Talmud is not a small book. It's 2,700 folios. That means 5,400 pages. And each page has a lot of material on it. And if it would be in everything in English, we're talking about more than Encyclopedia Britannica. And he knew it by heart, word for word, and he tested himself. I mean, he wanted me to test him, and he wasn't the only person that I did this with. I did it with another rabbi in Seattle. Now, you think this rabbi knew the whole Talmud by heart. When he was 18 years old, the rest of his life he would have devoted to something else. He never walked anywhere without carrying a volume of the Talmud with him. Whenever he had a free minute, he would review what he had learned. So he probably went through the whole Talmud every year. Every year went through the whole Talmud. But in addition to that, he would study Talmud whenever he had a chance. He went to a wedding, he would carry the volume with him, and he would study it. And he probably finished the Talmud more than once a year doing that. And he was a busy person. He had other things to do as well. So Ben Bhagavad is saying that no matter how many times you learn it, you have to keep on repeating it, reviewing it over and over again. And recognize that the Talmud, and not just Talmud, but Jewish teachings in general, has everything in it. What he means by that is everything you need for life, you get from Judaism. You don't have to consult with other cultures, with other philosophies. You don't have to learn other religions or other belief systems to make your understanding of life complete. You have everything in Torah. But then there's another way of looking at it that says, not only do you not have to consult any other tradition in order to know how to live your life as a good person, as someone who God would be happy with, but every area of wisdom, every area of science, of philosophy, of law, every culture, every discipline of knowledge can be found in the Torah. I mentioned this concept many times, and I told a story with the Rabbi who was certainly among the greatest, and in my opinion, the greatest Talmudic scholar of the generation, and the greatest scholar of Kabbalah of the generation, was also steeped in secular knowledge. Besides having a degree in electrical engineering from the Sorbonne, the Rebbe also was well-versed in every field you can think of. I remember there was a professor of physics from Syracuse whose father was the rabbi of Syracuse going back 60 years. And his father told me that his son had an audience with the Rebbe. And when he came out of his meeting with the Rebbe, he said, "I thought I knew physics." This is a prestigious professor of physics. And he was impressed that the Rebbe's knowledge of physics superseded his own knowledge. And the same, and not only mathematics and physics and and all the other scientific disciplines, but the Rebbe was well versed in all sorts of poetry and English playwrights, and there's hardly an area of knowledge that the Rebbe didn't know. Yet the Rebbe said that every area of knowledge, every discipline can be found in the Torah. And he challenged a professor who told this to my teacher, that the Rebbe said, and this professor, when the Rebbe made that claim to him, was skeptical. You're telling me that every theory in science can be found in the Torah? And the Rebbe says, yes, absolutely. Just tell me anything you have in mind, any idea, any theory, any concept. And at first he wanted to, he hesitated because he felt he was going to embarrass the Rebbe, that he's going to say something in science and the Rebbe could not find a source in the Torah. But the Rebbe persisted and says, I want to show you that this is true. And he mentioned a concept in chemistry, in medicine, and in philosophy. And without any hesitation, the Rebbe showed him the source in the Torah, where the concept was underlying one of the laws of the Torah. At any rate, that's what Ben Bagbag is saying, that everything, every area of knowledge can be found in the Torah. And you just have to know how to find it, but it's there. The Torah has everything. Now, why is it sounds like a very radical claim that every discipline can be found in the Torah, but it's not a radical claim at all when you realize what Torah is. Torah is not just a body of knowledge, it's divine knowledge. And as the Midrash says, when God created the world, as any builder would consult with an architect who would draw up blueprints, and you would use the blueprints to decide how to build the building. Anything that's in the building has to be in the blueprint, in the construction of the building. If it's not in the blueprint, then someone messed up. The contractor, the builder, the carpenters put something there that's not in the blueprint, so they have to start all over again. So if it's in the structure, it must be in the blueprint. Well, what is the blueprint of creation? So the Midrash says the Torah is God's blueprint. When God created the world, he consulted the Torah, and that is how he created the whole universe. So everything that's in the universe has to be found could be found. I'm not going to say has to be found, because most people cannot do it, but it could be found in the Torah. The Torah has everything in it. That's what Ben Bagbag is saying. And then he says, for all is there, and look into it. Another way of translating it, I told you many times that this translation is inadequate, but sometimes it's just giving you one possible translation. There are other translations. But one translation is, and with it you could see. With the Torah, you could see. You begin to see things in a different way. You have a different view of life, a different view of God, a different view of humanity, a different view of Judaism. Everything that you see through the prism of Torah is colored differently. It's not the same thing as if you see it not through the lens of Torah. That's one possible translation of it. And then he says, become gray and old therein. Which means when you get older, that doesn't mean you stop learning. Almost every other area of activity in a person's life, we drop or we diminish when we get older. If you're a football player, what is the old age for a football player?
35.
35. Okay.
35 is pretty old for them.
But in almost every area, the older you get, the less you're able to do the things that you were very good at when you were younger. When it comes to the study of Torah, it doesn't work that way. Now, of course, there are people who are not well and they suffer from the dementia and they can't learn. That's not their fault. But we're talking about a person who's in relatively good health but gets older, naturally less physically active and even less mentally active. Professors retire also, and then they they go into other things. They're sick and tired of teaching chemistry or biology or physics or whatever. They had enough of it. But when it comes to Torah, the older you get, the more time you have, you devote more time to the study of Torah. Not only that, it says there's a Mishnah that says that the difference between a Torah scholar and a ignorant person is the Torah scholar, the older he gets, his mind becomes more settled, which means you see things in a much more obvious way. When you're young, your mind is fertile and you're thinking of different ideas and you don't have clarity. The older you get, the more clarity you get. So maybe you're not as sharp as you were when you're young, and maybe you shouldn't be driving that much when you're 95 years old, which is middle age. But your mind is very much on a higher level, and that you're able to see things in a settled way. Then the Mishnah says, contrast that, but the old ignoramuses, old geezers, the older they get, the more foolish they become.
Well, hopefully not too much.
There's a story with the Rogachover, the greatest Talmudic scholar of the 20th century. And he didn't like honor at all. He didn't like to be put in any position of, he was given a special honor. So once he was at a meeting and they told him that he should be the first one to speak because he's the great scholar. And he says, no, I should be the last one to speak. And they said, why? He says, the Mishnah says that scholars, if I'm such a scholar, the older they get, the smarter they get. So the later I'll speak, the better it'll be. But for you ignoramuses, the sooner you'll speak, the better it'll be, because if you wait to the end, it'll be much less meaning to what you're going to say. So when you get old, you keep on learning and repeating the same things. Why is that? There are two ways of looking at it. One way is that it's God's Torah, and if God tells us to stand on our heads, it doesn't make any sense, but it's God's will, so we do it. Thank God, God never told us to stand on our heads, so we don't have to do it. But whatever God tells us to do, we do because God wants us to do it, and whether we appreciate it, whether we enjoy it, whether it makes any sense to us, we do it. That's one approach. The other approach is that when you review things, and as you get older, you see things in a different light, and you have a deeper understanding. Every time you review the same thing, you'll get a better understanding of that subject, no matter how many times you review it. I told the story several times before. I don't like to bore you with repeating myself over and over again, but there's a certain guarantee almost that people forget. So this is a story, a personal story. I was once at a gathering of the Rabbi, and the Rabbi said something, and I thought I understood what he said, and then a minute later he repeats it. And in my mind I'm thinking, why did the Rebbe repeat himself? I already know. If I knew it, then everyone else probably also knew it. So why did he have to repeat himself? And as I'm thinking that, the Rebbe interrupted his flow of whatever subject it was, and he spoke about something else. And he said, there's a prophet called Heschel, and he said prophecy in exile. He was exiled after the destruction of the first temple. He was in exile, and the book of Heschel describes where he was, where he became a prophet. It was on a river, and the name of the river is Kvar. Why does the Bible have to give you the name of a river? who cares what river it was? It could have been the Mississippi. It could have been, who cares if it was Kvar? So the Rebbe said, the book of Ezekiel is trying to tell you what exile does to a person's mind. That a person hears words of Torah, and then he hears it repeated. And he says to himself, Kvar. Kvar means, I already know it. So that's a sign that you're in exile. So the Rebbe read my thoughts. Maybe others had the same thoughts. I'm hoping that I wasn't the only one. That I was disturbed by the repetition. It bothered me that the Rebbe repeated himself. And the Rebbe was saying that that's a sign of you're in exile. Because if you were not in exile, it means if your mind was really clear, you would have realized what novel ideas came about in the repetition. And it's a sign you didn't understand the first time. If you understood what the first time it was said, you would appreciate the second time, the repetition. So what is the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe is saying that when it comes to Torah, there's no such thing as I'm doing it because I have no choice. God wants me to learn it. I'll learn it even though it's boring. It's really ridiculous, but I have no choice. No, there's every time you learn Torah, there's something new there. There's some new nuance that you didn't get the time before. The Rebbe spoke sometimes on the same subject, dozens, if not actually on the first verse of the Torah Breshit, someone collected over 100 different interpretations the Rebbe gave on it. And it's not as if the Rebbe didn't speak about other things. He spoke about thousands of subjects, but he was able to speak about the same subject, and each time a different nuance, a different kvetch, as we would say in Yiddish, a different emphasis, shed different light. That's what Ben Bagbag is saying, that no matter how many times, no matter how old you get, and you're repeating it over and over again, you'll always find something new. There's a biblical verse where Moses is berating the people, and he tells them that the kiloi davar reiku mikem, there's nothing empty. And the Talmud says that what he was trying to tell them, that if you feel there's something empty, something really has no substance in the Torah, the emptiness is mikem, is from you. You are the cause of the emptiness. You're empty. That's why you think that the knowledge is empty. There's no such thing as empty knowledge when it comes to Torah. Torah, every word of Torah, every concept of Torah has filled with living knowledge. It's constantly growing and gushing forth. That's why the Torah is sometimes compared to a fountain. A fountain is constantly gushing new water, more water. It's not just like a pool, which has a limited amount of water and doesn't add, no water is added to it by nature. But Torah is a gushing fountain. And then there's another passage in the Talmud which involves Ben Hehe, which some say is the same person as Ben Bagbag. He was discussing things with Hillel, the great sage Hillel, that a person who studies Torah and reviews his study 100 times is not called serving God. 101 times is called serving God. What does that mean? In those days, because the Talmud was not written, everyone had to memorize it. How do you memorize something? By review. So they would review everything they learned 100 times. That was the norm.
I think you'd have to.
100 times. 101 times was not the norm. So a person who does it 100 times is just following his norm. He's not really doing anything unusual. That was normal. I mean, I can't imagine someone reviewing the same thing 100 times. I would, most people would get bored and say, I know there's something new in every time, but 100 is a little too much. But in those days, that was their norm. And the Talmud gives an analogy with an Uber. What? Or a taxi. A taxi charges you, let's say, $50 to go anywhere in metropolitan New York. But if you want to go to Philadelphia, he's not going to just charge you the 50 and double it because it's twice as far. It'll be much, much more. To go the extra mile, they'll charge much more. Within the certain range, they charge so much. If you go out of that, there's a major charge, a major surcharge. And the Talmud says the same thing is true. When you study something 100 times, that's normal. That's the norm. And you have a limited amount of benefit from it, commensurate with 100 times. Obviously 100 is more than 99, but it's limited. But when you do it the 101st time, that is incredibly higher because you went beyond your limits. Now the Hebrew word mikem, the Torah is not empty. Mikem, it comes from you. The emptiness is yours. The word mikem adds up to 100. Because again, Hebrew letters are numbers. That means that when you study something only 100 times, when you do things only according to your norm, whatever the norm is, in those days it was 100. Today the norm could be 1. But whenever you're limited to the norm, there's a certain emptiness that comes from you, that you don't appreciate the real depth of the knowledge. Because you did it only 100 times, only according to your norm. When you do it beyond your norm, not only are you doing something that God wants you to do, and it's a sign of your submission to God, but it also will contribute to a deeper understanding of Torah.
Rabbi Greenberg?
Yeah.
May I ask a question about when Moses prayed to the upper level, the upper amount of what he was allowed to, and not beyond when he was about to, I think...
When he prayed to go into the land, God told him, he prayed 515 prayers. And then God told him, that's it, no more. Because if he would have prayed one more time, God would have given in to him. So God gives him a commandment, I don't want you to pray anymore. Once God commands him, he had no choice. He couldn't continue.
How long did that take him to do 515?
You know, there's a recording of it, but it's not available for the public. Yes.
I had one teacher, very great teacher, professor, and came to him student and told to him, Professor, last few days I play 12 hours per day.
How many hours?
12, 14 hours per day.
Yeah.
And professor asked him, did you have time to think what you're doing? If you read, it's 1. But you have to understand many things.
That's also part of learning. That's included. Everything that revolves around learning is also part of learning.
It's when they read, all the time read, it's not all the time necessary what clear understand many things in text. You have to stop.
And you have to stop and think about it. That's part of learning. Learning involves learning, saying the words, understanding it, and thinking about it. That's all part of it.
There's also the maturation of what you know, which I found as vital as the lesson is the maturation of the lesson.
Yeah, the more you learn, the more mature your understanding becomes.
Do you need a teacher?
What?
Do you need a teacher?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're not talking about the process of learning. Learning always requires learning from someone else. You can't just rely on your own knowledge. And even if you're an older person and your teachers are no longer there, you try to imagine, what would my teacher say about this? You try to think through their mind as much as possible.
May I ask one last question? I'm sorry. The gematria of 515. What is the numerical significance of 515?
Okay, when Moses, when he talks about his prayer, he uses the word vo'etz chanan, and I prayed, I supplicated God. That word adds up to 515. Also the word tefillah, prayer, is 515. Also the word shira, song, is 515.
Tefillah is...
Yeah, so these words are, the number 515 has significance. One day maybe we'll do a class about communicating with numbers. We can't use any words, just numbers.
Maybe that's why God wanted him to stop, because tefillah matches 5:15.
Well, he did his utmost, and if he would have gone beyond that, he would have broken through the barriers, but God didn't want him. God wanted him to stay.
It would have been disrespectful to God after God asked him not to. Yeah.
Well, once you're commanded, as long as God didn't command him, God just told him you're not crossing the Jordan. God didn't tell him you're not allowed to cross the Jordan. He never gave him a commandment. Once God gives him a commandment, Moses had no choice. He had to comply.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why was Ben Bagan, I understand he was a convert, so probably shed a different light, but why was he so cryptic? Like, why was he,
I mean,
the way he turned it over? It doesn't say what it is, like, almost secretive.
Well, the partial answer is that because he was a convert, the things that he taught, he tried to not be very open about it because he was afraid of if someone quotes him and they understand that he's referring to Torah, that would have been problematic for him. Maybe that's the reason. Also, it depends on the context. If people are talking about Torah and they say, turn it over, it's obvious that the it is referring to what they were doing before. They were studying Torah. So you have to go look at the context. What's the context over here? Ethics of the Fathers is all about Torah ethics. So they're talking about Torah, so it's obvious. Then he says, turn it over. The it refers to what we've been discussing until now. So it's cryptic to us, but it wasn't cryptic to someone who sees it in context. Just one other thought, a possible understanding of the words, and look into it. But instead of look into it, translating it as, with it you will see. This is a subject that can take a long time. I'm just going to mention it briefly. If you look in the Torah, what word is used most often about how we should relate to God's teachings? Shema. Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel. It's hearing, and we find that word repeated dozens of times in the Torah. Hear, listen. But sometimes, not too often, you find the word re'eh, look. In the Talmud, whenever it tries to bring a proof or an argument, it will introduce it with the words ta, shema, come and listen. In the Zohar, which is the principal work of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, it's always ta chazi, come and see. There's a different way we digest things through the power of hearing as compared to the power of vision. When you see, if someone tells you a story, it's really a far-fetched story. Come on, I can't believe that. You're entitled to be skeptical if it sounds really too good to be true. It's probably not true. Even if it's a reliable person who tells it to you, you still have, you know what? Maybe they thought, maybe they were imagining things. You can always have questions about things that you hear. But if you saw it with your own eyes, although eyes deceive and people, eyewitnesses have conflicting versions of what they saw, but to you, the person who saw it, you are convinced that this is what happened. No one is going to question it and say, how could it be that this happened when it doesn't make sense? He said, I don't know if it makes sense or not. I saw it with my own eyes. There are two levels of learning Torah. There's a level where you understand what you're learning, but you can't see it. And there's a higher level of seeing. When we are presently before the Messianic Age, our understanding of Torah is through hearing and understanding. When Mashiach comes, he will teach Torah through visual. It's like everything will be clear, like watching a movie. You could read the book, but things become vivid when you see the movie. Because you're seeing it with your own eyes. You're seeing what the action with your own eyes. Judaism to us is now hearing. We hear about it. We receive it. We go to school. We learn. We read. But when Mashiach comes, everything that we now know through hearing will become vivid as if to see. That Torah gives you the ability, ultimately, to see the reality of everything, not just hear about it. So that could be another dimension of understanding what he means when he says, and look into it. Not look into it, but with it you will see. The more we learn now through hearing, the more we will see in the future. That's why learning Torah today is so important, because the degree to which we will see depends on what we hear now. Any questions?
I have one last question, and it actually refers to the last Ben Hey, according to the labor is the reward. I've heard that translated, according to the effort is the reward. Is that a mistranslation? Which is correct?
It's in Aramaic, actually, and the Hebrew version is tsar. Tsar is usually translated as pain.
Pain?
If there's no pain, there's no gain. Tsar. So they translate it as labor, but it's not the literal translation. This is not a literal translation. They take liberties with translating, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not right. But in this case, they're not wrong. It's not talking about physical pain, that you have to feel physical pain whenever you do a mitzvah, but it means the effort that goes into it. According to the effort would be the reward. But we'll leave this for next week, God willing. And remember, next week the class is only going to be on Thursday, not Wednesday.
Are you at Seneca on Wednesday again?
No, that's only once a month.
Oh, okay. That was wonderful.
Next class Thursday.
Yeah, right?
Sounds good.
With them, of course, yeah, no.